When life happens, plans need to change. Shaping Change, hosted by certified financial planner Ross Marino, is dedicated to helping financial advisors better serve their clients when life takes those unexpected turns.
Welcome to the Shaping Change Show, Part 2, Jamie Hopkins with Rewirement. How you doing, Jamie?
I'm doing well. So it's a beautiful day to be alive, right?
So in our first part, we looked at a lot of what led up to where we are today and how people see things and how they make decisions. And in your book, when you went to part 2, you said that you added questions at the end and you updated some information, but also you start to talk a lot about some of the trends that are going on now and how that's going to impact the future. And I think that's best in a separate conversation, which is why I wanted to do a part 2. So let's start with the book. You have a 10-step process in there. Let's pick one process or one step in the process that is often overlooked that'll really matter down the road for people.
Yeah, and it's a great question, and kind of here, I could probably make an argument for any of the 10, right? I mean, that's why you have it. But one of the ones that just kind of is sticking in my mind right now, as you bring this up, is actually the conversion of assets into income. It's to some degree that's what is the process that when the rubber hits the road, or however you want to say it, when we actually have to execute. Because I think execution is always important, right? We can give people great ideas, we can review things, but if we can't execute, right, if we can't implement, we actually don't get anywhere. And I've seen that a ton, right? You've seen it. You work with a client, you tell them all this great stuff, you do all the analysis, you do all the review, and you get to the end of the day and they're still doing the same thing they were doing 15 years ago, and we're unable to implement or execute. So execution and implementation. So Carson, always talks about IQ, not intelligence, but implementation quotient. And to me, that's huge, right? When you see firms, when you see clients that move forward, they're able to implement recommendations. So, and that goes to the right questions you ask. It's how you frame things. It's understanding the client so they'll actually move and make a decision. And sometimes like the efficient stuff. So there's a big, if you go look at academic research, and a lot of my former colleagues, right, Wade Pfau and others will talk about like efficient frontier and the most efficient portfolio. And end of day, most clients don't give a flying whatever about the most efficient portfolio in the world, right? Like they just don't care. They want something that they can relate to and works for them. And so I think that whole idea really matters, but it's different for different clients, right? What drives one person to act is not what drives everyone to act. I talk about that in the book, right? For some clients, you can present something in a fashion that can drive behavior because they're a risk-averse person, and they're going to react to mitigating or eliminating risk. Whereas somebody else like myself, and probably, you might be similar like this too. Like if you tell me, hey, you can go do this, buy this annuity and reduce your risk in your portfolio, like it has no appeal to me, right? Like, and I'm not against annuities. I like annuities from an income standpoint, but I don't like annuities do not have any value in my personal mind, right? To me, about reducing the volatility of my portfolio when I'm investing. I just don't care about that. So that presentation style or implementation strategy won't work with me, but it does work with other people. So when you kind of start getting a little bit deeper into planning, and I think as this profession continues to evolve, we're going to get better and better at that. But the flip side is that's a good thing. It's taking behavior, it's taking decision making, and we're learning and we're driving positive behaviors. But guess what? That could also all be used for bad things and harmful outcomes too. The one I'll kind of, I guess, well, maybe I won't say the name, but everyone will know it anyway. But, there's a popular trading app out there, right, that drops confetti down from the sky when you make a trade. In essence, right, that's kind of
Hold on a second. Yeah. I'm sure I know which app you're talking about. I've never used it. It literally drops confetti on the screen and celebrates a trade?
It used to, your first trade, it used to drop confetti down from the screen. I haven't tested it, or I'd have to get a new thing, but yeah, it did that. And look, like that's obviously, it's the gamification of trading, and the goal for that is to encourage more trading, right? I mean, and so they've actually used a lot of really smart behavioral tools, tricks, decision-making processes to drive people to act more. But arguably, we're not sure if that's a good outcome yet, right? Like we're in that mode of like, is some of that actually being used to almost create addictive like behaviors and not positive outcomes? So for anytime we learn about the human condition and how to drive decisions, that can also be used in negative ways too. So I think there will be a balance of that. Even Congress came out and said they're probably going to start regulating a lot of that more. And just in the last couple of weeks, they came out and talked about that, and the SEC too, right? I mean, both of them have said, "Hey, we're getting a little concerned about this." Yeah, I know that's a big answer, but it leads us to some of the technology pieces, which I think are going to be crucial for execution moving forward.
Well, first, I love IQ, implementation quotient. There's my Ron nugget for the day, because action matters most, and we know that. All the talk in the world is great, but if the decision didn't follow through with an action, really doesn't matter that much. So let's go to the next question. What is coming down the road that maybe I, as a financial planner, really aren't looking at, or maybe I don't understand the significance of what it's going to mean to my clients?
Yeah, and this is a fun question, and I'm glad that you agreed to ask me it. Because this is the stuff, when I have free time, I try to think about this, and I try to take the step back. And, I didn't do this all the time at the college, but I get to do it a little bit more now with Ron, because Ron likes to think about this stuff, which is, if you were going to disrupt the industry today, how would you do it? And you can go in a whole bunch of different directions. Ron loves flying cars, so I know that that's one of the things. He's a big believer in that and thinks they're coming, and relatively soon. I remember I did an interview with Ashton Kutcher, who a lot of people know just as more of like the actor, but he was one of the early investors in Uber and Airbnb. And then he's got a Thorn, which is the cyber security firm that goes after the child predators. He's actually an incredibly smart person. And I was shocked by it, because he's been more or less typecast into the dumb jock bro guy. But then you have this really brilliant technology and investor guy on the side. And he talked about flying cars, and he said, I'm not as interested in the actual cars, but all the infrastructure it's going to take to create this. So what is the air traffic control for it? Then that's where I want to be investing. But then you start thinking about some of those things, and even some of the things that happened in the past year. And I think I'm actually still of the opinion that the pandemic didn't move us as far as some people think from workplace. I see more and more some companies saying, hey, nobody has to come back. But I've seen companies that have now said everyone needs to come back. I don't think we got pushed all the way away. But the ability to work from distance, the ability to work from a Zoom, to work from your house. And all of a sudden, if you think that we had autonomous self-driving flying cars, well, could I go from here to Wilmington, Delaware in maybe 15 minutes? If I just had a straight line flying car, I don't know how fast they're going to go, but all of a sudden, right, the ability to live in different places and work for longer, because mobility changes. I mean, probably unlike anything we've seen since the actual car or the plane, right, could happen. And I think I think autonomous vehicles are really the shift there. I don't even really care about the flying ones as much, but just self-driving vehicles. I mean, think about how many parents or people whose eyesight starts to decline later on, but could still do a job. And now all of a sudden, that mobility aspect is just completely removed. And then all of a sudden the workforce opens up to another 10, 15, 20 million people that are now looking for employment, because mobility and distance and all of that is taken off the table. Well, that's transformative to the whole economy, right? The other thing is, there's doctors and people out there that think we're on this precipice of, and again, I'm not saying these are things that I believe in, but there's people out there that are looking at this. Which is, there's some people out there that think during somebody's lifetime today, right, the person who's going to pass age 200 has already been born, right? So there's actually a lot of doctors that are starting to believe that. And there's some doctors now that are saying, hey, look, we're nearing the time period where, if you had unlimited resources, you wouldn't die from natural causes anymore, right? That we're actually getting closer and closer to that. Those things are transformative. I mean, you can't have a work career of 30 years and retire for 150. reality, right? Like it just doesn't work. So when you start looking at that, like, and not longevity of people living to 95 and 100, but people living to 200, right? That's totally disruptive to the entire system. I think that stuff is really big. The other stuff, is more closer to the vest now. It's just, where does all this blockchain, crypto, digital assets, currencies, what gets disrupted there that we just haven't even thought about? I mean, the one that I really wasn't a big believer on, and I guess I'm probably still not, but it's there. And so whether I like something or not never matters, right? Like NFTs and digital art, I understand the concepts behind it. It doesn't resonate with me, but the reality is, like, I don't think that's going away anymore either. But if you asked anyone 15, 20 years ago, oh, digital art's going to become a huge thing and people are going to buy digital properties that don't exist in the real world for hundreds of thousands of dollars, you would just be like, no, that's not a thing. End of conversation. Now we at least have to have the conversation when people are spending millions of dollars on these things. Like, they're here, whether you like them or not. They're here. Just like if you didn't like people mailing scratched DVDs out to your house like Netflix did at one point, well, I don't really care. The distribution in the channel was there. And like, people forget, like, that used to be like kind of a joke of a service. I remember people get these DVDs, right? And they would always be scratched. You could watch like 3/4 of the movie. And then, like, now we have this multi-billion-dollar company that's changed the way that everyone is approaching entertainment. And so I think there could be things like that. I think the crypto smart contracts will probably be a big thing, especially for the insurance world. Insurance world's probably still 20 years behind everyone in technology. So even if they caught up to today's technology, it would be completely disruptive to our daily life. But I mean, imagine that. Let's just smart contract, right? Where you say you have hail damage on the top of your house, drone flies out, takes pictures, kicks into the smart contract, you're paid the same day, right? I mean, all of that exists today. Like, there's nothing in that story that the technology doesn't exist today. And I know I've mentioned Ron a couple of times, mostly because I spent too much time with him the last month. But he's been saying this too. He goes, think about it. Today is the worst technology experience you'll ever have for the rest of your life. Right? Like, this is as bad as it's ever going to be again. Tomorrow is going to be better. The day after that's going to be better. It's true for advisors. It's true for consumers. And I mean, there'll be things that we don't even think of that come out. As I said, like, I didn't think of a lot of those things. And there's a lot of needs and things that'll be automated and jobs will shift. I'm not as fearful as some people are that, like, jobs just get automated and we lose the profession. I mean, there was a time period where I think 98% of the world was farmers. Right now, it's like 1%. But does that mean 97% of the workforce is now gone? No, you shift and you do other things. Like, we didn't know that we needed Twitter, right? Like, I don't know. And that was a bunch of people that work for Twitter. So kind of every time new technology develops, it actually does kind of create new industries and jobs and opportunities. So, if flipping burgers goes away, I don't really feel that sad about that. I mean, I think it's probably good that people don't have to stand there and flip burgers all day, and some other opportunity will develop from that we haven't seen yet.
Ashton Cute, how do you say his last name?
Ashton Kutcher. Yeah.
Kutcher. Okay.
Yeah.
He is actually one of the early adopters and VCs in the crypto and digital asset space. So he was in early. I'm sure he's doing well. He's obviously a visionary person. It is pretty amazing when you think about what could be with some of the technology that is literally in front of us today, but it's not actually adopted. But it's easy for us to connect the dots, right? The brain loves to say step one, step two, I see where this is going. But anybody who thinks deeply and has been doing that for a long period of time, they've been wrong a lot of times. So how about you share something you missed on?
Yeah, well, so I wrote an article back in I've done two that I've been pretty wrong on. And one was about self-driving cars. And I know we're kind of on this topic, but this is one that I really missed on. And it's actually still not here yet. So I guess maybe I'm not wrong yet, because I might have still gotten there faster than others. But I remember thinking, I wrote this whole paper on like liability of self-driving cars, right? I'm an attorney and I started looking at it. I compared it to canine law, which is more or less like, do you know that there's a risk or that there is an issue and then you don't fix it and there's a second bite, right? Like most states operate and there's this like first bite's free, second bite is a problem. So if you have technology and your car malfunctions and you don't really get it fixed and it malfunctions again, you might create some type of liability there, or you knew that there was a risk with your car and it malfunctioned, right? But what I missed on all of that is I just kept thinking, and people still push back on this on me, but I kept thinking people are going to still own cars, right? Like I looked at this whole thing about, hey, personal liability of owning cars, and I'm going to, buy a self-driving car for my kids or teach them how to drive. And then all of a sudden I realized like there's absolutely zero reason to own a car if they're self-driving. There's zero reason why. My car, your car, unless you drive as a profession, which you won't be needed anymore. You're right. Like your car probably sits idle 95 to 98% of the time, right? Throughout the course of the day, it doesn't do anything. Honestly, if you live in a neighborhood of 20 people, it's actually possible that you only need one car in aggregate of their time being used to service the entire 20 households. Now, because of when people travel to and from work, there's going to be peak times, but in total aggregate, right, you might only need one car to service 20 households. Well, there's no reason for 20 people to buy 20 cars. It's actually a very good example of, mortality pooling, right? If we need $100 and we have 10 people with a 10% risk, should we all save $100? Should we all just put $10 into one pot? Well, actually, it's the exact same decision. If we only need one vehicle that can drive itself and be there, all of a sudden you go to, okay, well then Ubers or Fords or Toyotas or Teslas, they just own all the cars. And they just come around and pick you up. And more or less, you're just renting that time with the vehicle. Maybe, wealthier people, they still have their own car and they reserve it for themselves because they don't want to share it. Okay, fine. Right. And that always remains true to some extent. But, that was something I really missed on. And technically, it's not really here yet. But you could say like Uber rideshare and Uber and Lyft, and they're kind of pieces of that. Right. Like I have friends that live in Philadelphia that have gotten rid of their cars. They don't own cars anymore. Right. They don't need them. And you can see that, but if they actually became autonomous, it would push that forward significantly. And that's, when I realized that this change was coming was actually because I was working with State Farm and they actually view it as a huge risk. So the biggest risk to their entire model for one period, I remember somebody saying, was self-driving cars, because if you only had one car for every 20 people and they didn't get in accidents anymore and you didn't own the car, there's not much car insurance left. So, yeah.
I'll tell you, that is in my mind, when I think about that, I wouldn't have connected the dots to the car insurance companies. I mean, that's going to be a casualty if that plays out. But I think it just stresses the point in my brain of why we understand life happens, plans change, and our assumptions may or may not play out, but we may not even be thinking of some of the big factors that are going to influence our lives 10 and 20 years from now. So that just brings it back to making good decisions today. And, the self-driving cars, if you're in a big city, a lot of those people already don't have cars because they can get where they need to be. Who has a car? People who want the convenience, and convenience has a cost. If you want to pay for it, great. If not, it may be pretty convenient anyway. And I would see how that ties into longevity, for mobility, for more interaction, for quality of life. Now people live even longer. So that could be another whole show. But the future is going to be interesting, right? There's no question about it. But how about we wrap up? And let's wrap up with a question that I always love to close with. That's, of course, the magic wand question. And you're a thinker. You think about the future. You think about trends. I'm sure you sit around and think, man, it would be great if. So if you can wave this magic wand that I'm showing on the screen, change anything in the world, what would you change, Jamie?
Oh, yeah, if I could change anything in the world. So I'm going to pick something currently on my mind. It's probably not the number one thing I would change, but we'll pick something that'll kind of make this group thick. Okay. So is that fair enough? Can I pick?
Take it.
Yeah. Obviously if I could change anything, who knows, maybe I'd make the, infinite worlds and people don't die anymore. Cool. So there we go. But something more meaningful. But I think when I look at, our space, and I push people in this, and this is going to become a conversation coming up. which is if I could change anything about our tax system. Okay, I'm going to go there. What would I change? I would probably move everything to an estate tax. All right. So, and this always gets people go, why? The estate tax is terrible. It's going to destroy farms. I'm like, okay, pause yourself, right? Now you're applying a bunch of other things that, probably actually don't relate to this. But if I had two choices, I could pay all of my taxes that the government needs for the revenue. Or I'm just assuming the government still needs revenue. Nobody's proven that there's any model that works without a government needing revenue yet. So there's no example of a successful country and people and businesses without a government that needs revenue. So I'm going to say that that's still needed. And so the government needs revenue. I can either go to work and the government's going to take 30% of my pay every year for the rest of my life. Basically our model, right? That's what we live under. Or I could pay no taxes while I'm alive. I never pay any taxes. I earn whatever I earn. I come home, I spend it, I save it, I invest it, I buy stuff, I build things. And when do I pay my taxes? I pay my taxes at death. Whatever is left over that I haven't spent, given away, reinvested, goes to the government for the revenue. Well, that's actually kind of cool. Which one would I rather pick? Obviously, I would rather pick the one where I just pay all my taxes at death. And flip side is, if I just spend all my money, the government's actually kind of okay with that too, right? I mean, they're okay with if everyone just spent all their money every year and it's being reinvested and stuff's growing. That's okay. We get a similar outcome because money is flowing, things are being built, things are progressing, they're growing. But to me, if I look at those two, I'd rather pay all of my taxes when I'm dead. And I think it's not even close. Like if you just gave me that option today, that Jamie, you don't have to pay another single dollar of tax for the rest of your life, but you could, whatever's left in your estate when you die, we're going to take that for your taxes. I'd be 100% fine with that.
That would be revolutionary. Not quite as much as a flying car, which I'm pretty sure that'll happen one day, but that would certainly be something. Jamie Hopkins, thanks so much for being on the show.
Yep. Thanks for having me on. Appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to Shaping Change with Ross Marino. This show is for general information purposes only and is not intended to provide recommendations or advice. Speak with a legal, tax, or financial advisor before making any decisions. Past performance references are historical and do not guarantee future results. Visit rlsummit.com to learn more.